Welcome back to Plant-Based Kidneys Kitchen. I'm Michelle Crosmer, renal dietitian, and today we're making a plant-based breakfast bake. This is something that you guys have been asking for. I originally found this recipe on My Quiet Kitchen food blog, and I did the nutrient analysis for it, and we're adjusting a couple things to make it more specific for people with kidney disease. So let's get started. There are several steps to this, but if you check out the link for the recipe, there's some directions of things that you can do the night before. So if you're having some sort of brunch or something, you can prepare things ahead of time. So then you just have to throw it in the oven. So first we're going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Okay, so one thing I'm doing out of order from the recipe is I'm going to get my veggies started sauteing, and then I'm going to go to make the tofu egg base for it. So first, let's turn on our pan. So you can saute your veggies in a little bit of olive oil, avocado oil, or you could do water or some low sodium vegetable broth if you want to do a oil-free version of it. And it would really be, for the amount of veggies we have, probably about a tablespoon of olive oil that you would use. Okay, so we're going to let that start to heat up. And then these are the veggies we're going to saute just for a couple of minutes. Again, it's going to be baked in the oven, so it doesn't need to be fully cooked before we do that. So we're going to have a half a cup of onion diced up. You can use red, white, green onions, shallots, whatever you want and prefer. You're going to chop up one large bell pepper, whatever color you want. And then you're going to slice or chop one large zucchini as well. Then the other thing we're going to do is some raw spinach, about 3 ounces. So I did weigh this out, but I got it from this 6-ounce bag of raw baby or organic raw baby spinach. So I'm just using about half of that amount. You could use, again, using some raw spinach in a recipe that makes multiple servings limits the potassium. It doesn't make it super high in potassium, but you could always use some kale. You could use arugula. You can use chard, you can use collard greens, you can use other greens instead of the spinach if you didn't want to use the spinach. So first, let's get our veggies sauteed. I'm gonna throw onions and then also the bell peppers. Those usually take the longest to soften. Get these veggies sauteed. I'm going to throw the zucchini in. And the reason I'm doing this first is because I just anticipated, right, cooking so many veggies is going to take a little time. I actually did add, so one of the major things I changed, it called for a vegan sausage in the original recipe, and we don't want to be using a super salty processed vegan meat, just like we don't want super salty processed animal meat. So we're adding more veggies to the recipe and then leaving out the vegan sausage. So that's why we have so much veggies, and I'm letting it start to cook a little bit ahead of time. And then we're going to make the tofu egg mixture in the meantime. Okay, and then once that cooks down a little, then we'll add the spinach. So let's make the tofu egg mixture. So we're going to add all these ingredients to a blender. So we're going to do 2 blocks of extra firm tofu that you've then drained. So you're not going to use the liquid that comes in it. You're just going to add the block. And what I'm going to do, just so it maybe blends up a little bit more nicely in my blender, I'm going to cut the block in half. I'm going to blend that a little, then add the liquid. Then I'll add the other block just because it's a lot, and this is a more countertop. It's a smaller blender. So the liquid is 1 cup of water. Let's chop that up just a little bit. And the recipe does say that it's a little bit thick. So just be prepared for that. You might have to blend it, stop, blend it some more, stop, blend it some more. So now I will add this other block of tofu. overload my blender, right? And then it calls for half a cup of an unflavored, unsweetened plant milk. So I'm going to use cashew milk. Yes. All right, blend this up a little bit more. Again, you might have to stop a few times. It's a pretty thick consistency, almost like ricotta cheese. So you might have to stop a couple times, take the lid off, mix it all up, and then blend again. Another thing too is, I mean, you can taste it as you go. There's no raw egg in it. If you feel like you need more pepper, or you need more of anything really, then you can always add that. So then we're going to add the other ingredients for this. So we're going to add basically all of our seasonings to here. So what we're going to do is nutritional yeast. So a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast is what we're going to use. And this is going to help give us that like cheesy flavor. So a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. Don't forget to saute your veggies just every couple of minutes. Okay, then we are going to do 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 3/4 teaspoon of salt. So this is where, again, another thing that I do differently. The recipe calls for the Indian black salt, and it calls for 2 teaspoons of that. So what I would say is if you want to use that, cut it in half and only use 1 teaspoon. That is what gives, and tofu egg mixtures, that's what gives it like that sulfuric egg type of smell. I don't particularly like that in eggs, and so I prefer not to have that. So I'm going to use regular salt. But regular salt's a little bit higher in sodium than the Indian black salt, so I'm only going to do 3/4 teaspoon for the whole recipe. Then we're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper and a 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric, and this is what's going to give the tofu kind of more of a yellow egg color. Blend that all up. I want to show you what it looks like. Of course, it's very full blender. So see, it's pretty like eggy and thick, kind of jiggles like an egg. So again, you can always add a little more nutritional yeast, some more pepper, garlic powder, anything like that if you feel like it needs it. So let's check on our veggies. So now those have cooked down a little. I'm now going to add the spinach. In the story of my life today, I should have used a bigger pan. This makes for more cleanup, right? So while the spinach cooks down a little bit, we are going to get our pan ready. So you are going to use a 9 by 13 inch pan, and we're going to lightly grease it. To grease it, I have some avocado oil. That's what I'm going to be using. And that is just so things don't stick. If you see any crazy stems, you can always pull stuff like that out. Okay, so this is kind of a funky part of the recipe. And I'll do it in here and then transfer it to the pan. So a lot of baked breakfast bake recipes call for potatoes or hash browns, which you're more than welcome to use. But of course, that's going to make it a lot higher in potassium. So this recipe, what I liked about it is it uses bread or sourdough bread as the base. And so you do about 8 to 10 ounces of sourdough bread, and you can either cut or just break it up into pieces. So I'm going to cut that because I think it's easier, but really I'm just going to do pieces like about this big. Again, there's nothing official that it has to be. This is all going to be thrown into the pan and then cooked all together. So it doesn't have to be perfect by any means. And I think what I read on this original recipe was that it would be about a half of like a round or a loaf of sourdough is what it would come out, is what, 8 to 10 ounces is. So let's get this all chopped up, and then we'll start to add all of our stuff to the pan. And again, guys, I'm trying this recipe for the first time, but just making some of these adjustments. So we're going to be taste testing it together and seeing how we like it. And you are more than welcome to make whatever substitutions you want. My goal with this is, again, someone asked for a breakfast bake recipe. And so I think that's a really great thing for brunches. Think of quiche, and breakfast bakes are used a lot for brunch, and you can easily make a tofu egg mixture and then ideally add a bunch of veggies and make some other substitutions so that it is lower in sodium. So we have all of our bread pieces. I'm going to turn this pan off now because the veggies are cooked enough. Okay, so now we're going to layer this. So the bottom layer, again, we greased our 9 by 13 inch pan, and then we're going to spread the bread out on the bottom. Try to do it as evenly as possible. Of course, another thing that I changed with the recipe is that I'm not adding, it calls for vegan cheese, and vegan cheese, like layering it throughout and then adding it on top. I'm going to leave out the vegan cheese. Yes, there are some vegan cheeses that don't have phosphorus additives. Usually they're still pretty salty, and they're highly processed vegan food. What I would rather do is leave the cheese out and then add a quarter of an avocado on top of my piece of my breakfast bake, and have some fruit on the side. I'd rather use my potassium for that, get more fiber, some good healthy fat from the avocado. It's a whole food. And then again, get some berries on the side, add even more fiber and some sweetness to the dish. So we have the bread spread out. Then what we're going to do is basically just layer the veggies on top of that. As evenly as possible, right? This actually takes, it bakes for a while in the oven. It's a loaded pan, so this, we have our bread, we have our veggies on top. Now, fun part, we get to do the egg mixture. Try not to just make a complete mess. So really, I think it's easy. We just really want this to be even on top. So you can kind of pour it. And so this is our egg substitute. It's going to be a protein source. We have the nutritional yeast and the turmeric to give it some color. But just do it as evenly as you can. There. Any spots? Just gonna make sure everything is covered. So if you were adding cheese or vegan cheese, then you wouldn't add it yet. We're going to bake this for 30 minutes uncovered. Then after 30 minutes, you could take it out, add some of that cheese on top, and then bake it, and then cover it up, and then bake it. Another thing though that you could do that I think I might do that would be good is I'm going to add a little bit of paprika on top, give it some good color. And that gives some good flavor too. Okay, so this is our breakfast bake. See what it looks like. We're going to put it into the oven for 30 minutes. So again, this is not done yet. We're about halfway done. So if you were to be putting any sort of cheese or vegan cheese on this, then, oh, there's my timer for it. Then you would add that right now, and then you would cover it, and then you would bake for another 25 to 30 minutes. I'm just going to throw it in the oven. I'm not adding any cheese, but I can see my veggies are cooking. I could tell the tofu egg mixture starting to firm up. So I'm going to throw it in for about 15-20 minutes, give it a check, and then see how it is. Okay, our breakfast bake is done. It's been about 20 to 25 minutes in addition to the original 30 minutes that we had it in. All right. Show you what it looks like. Has a nice golden color. Remember, we put some paprika on it. You see the egg mixture is kind of moved down with the breads and the veggie. So what we need to do is, obviously it's scorching hot. We need to let it sit for at least 10 minutes and then we'll cut into it. Okay, our breakfast bake is all done cooling and you're going to cut it into 12 pieces. So 3 and 4. So here's a piece here. You can definitely see the tofu makes like an egg texture. One thing I do need to admit to, the original recipe called for 3 tablespoons of flour. So I originally planned to use some garbanzo bean flour, and you add that in to the blender mixture of the egg. I completely forgot to put that in. I think it turned out fine without it. Maybe it would have held together a little bit better, but I think it's fine without it. I removed that from the nutrition information. So let me give you the nutrition information. So again, the whole pan or whole recipe makes 12 servings. So per serving, it's 156 calories, 12 grams of protein, 16 grams of carbohydrates, 2 grams of fiber, 300 milligrams of sodium, 337 milligrams of potassium, and 166 milligrams of phosphorus. That 300 milligrams of sodium is lower than the original recipe because we cut the salt. Of course, you can cut it even more if you wanted, but we're having this. This is our main sodium for our meal. Overall, the meal is still low in sodium. I'm going to try it plain, but like I mentioned before, instead of cheese, I'm going to add a quarter of an avocado. There's plenty of room. That's about 175 milligrams of potassium. So if you add that to the 337 milligrams of potassium that the bake is alone, it's still considered a low potassium meal. So we cut into this. Of course, we have our veggies. Remember, we had that sourdough bread on the bottom. We get some veggies and the egg mixture. Tastes pretty good. Definitely has an eggy texture. What I think it needs is some hot sauce and avocado. So again, if you had added cheese to the bake in the baking process, then it would be higher in sodium, a little bit higher in potassium, but there is room if you want to instead do avocado, which will give it a little bit more fiber. Like I said, overall, the recipe is not a high fiber recipe. You could have some half a cup or 1 cup of berries on the side, which is a low potassium, high fiber fruit. And adding a little bit of hot sauce doesn't add much sodium either. And then you can get that spice and then a little bit of creaminess from the avocado. So let's get some avocado, hot sauce, egg, veggie, and some of that sourdough bread. See, that I like more. You guys can click on the link to go directly to this girl's website who has this original recipe. I will put the tweaks and the adjustments that I made for you in the note section. If you try this, please share and comment. Subscribe to the channel. Let me know what recipes you want to see made next time. Thanks.